Have we hit a hard ceiling on home prices in the United States? Some would argue that we have, and here's one indicator, and that is the number of homes in the country that received more than list price in 2019. That number went to 19.9%, which sounds like a lot. That means 1 out of every 5 homeowners got more than what they're asking for their home price. But if you compare that to 2018, it was more like 22%. So what we're starting to see here is that people are getting a little bit more resistant to paying exorbitant prices. They're not willing to take the ride all the way up to double-digit appreciation. Here's another interesting fact is how much more do people pay when they do go over full price? That number is about $5,100. Again, less than it was in 2018 when it was $5,500 at that time. Now, what causes this number to happen? One thing that people could argue is that it's because we've had double-digit appreciation for several years. At some point, you hit a point where buyers just will not go any further. It's a ceiling, a hard ceiling on pricing. Now, we've had the benefit of also having interest rates coming down, which has allowed buyers to stretch. And there's something happening right now in our market currently where we have the prices of interest coming down further again. We're now 8-year lows. You could almost call it 40-year lows, 50-year lows for interest, less than we've seen in a long time since the Great Recession. So that might also bump up pricing a bit, but we still have hit this place where people are not willing to go much further. When you're looking at the Case-Shiller index, you're seeing what happened. We had this run up where we went to 10, 15% appreciation in some markets. And now we're bouncing down more like 4 or 5% appreciation, which is a good, strong, healthy market in most of the areas. Now, what causes people to stop? What causes the hard ceiling? It's just income, and it's their ability to have a percentage of their income going towards housing. There's a hard limit. They're not going to take money out of their kids' a college account. They're not going to not put food on the table. They are going to have a limit on how much they're going to invest in that housing. And for a lot of Americans, that number is stretched all the way up to 40, 50% of their income. But once you get beyond that point, they just can't afford to do it anymore. What you're seeing here with this graph is you're seeing incomes going back all the way back to 2000. The red line indicates nominal income or actual income. The blue line indicates adjusted for inflation. So if you adjust for inflation, people in 2000 were making about $60,000 a year. But if you ratchet that up to where we're at now, 2020, that's about $63,688. But you look at home prices during that period of time and interest rates, and you can see why people can't afford much more than they did even 20 years ago. So that's a very interesting numbers that we look at. So when we're talking about pricing with sellers, how do we put this all in perspective? Well, one way to do this is having a conversation about not just looking at comps, but looking at demand. And demand-based pricing is such an interesting concept that almost no one talks about. So what is demand-based pricing? So demand-based pricing is having the conversation with the seller and saying, listen, when we put your home in the market, we need to look at 2 different things. One is the comps. That's what comparable sales are happening in your neighborhood that are going to be very similar to what an appraiser looks at when they appraise your home. Because there's really 3 people involved in any transaction. There's the seller, there's the buyer, and then there's a lender. And the lender is actually the one that's often putting the most money into the transaction. So they're going to hire a third-party appraiser, and they're going to look at the comparable sales to make sure that the buyer is not overpaying for the house and the lender is not at risk. But we can have a comp-based price and still not sell your house. And the reason for that is because we could price your house perfectly, but we got to make sure there's buyers in that price range. So that's why I like to look at demand. So we at my company use what we call a market snapshot report. And my coaching students get this as well. And this is where we break the market down by price band. And we look at every price starting at 0, going all the way up to pricing categories. And we look at how many listings came on the market the first of the month, or that were active the first of the month, how many went pending last month, and then we get a monthly supply indicator. But the really interesting thing is, just to kind of play with some numbers here, if you look at this that I'm sharing with you now, the numbers for homes that sold between 500 and 750,000, there was only 12 properties that went pending last month in my market. Now, at one ratchet down from 350 to 5, there was 52 homes that went pending. Now think about that. If you're a seller that comps out at 525 or 509, Do you go to that higher price, or do you come down to the next pricing tier and open yourself up to a lot more buyer activity? So it's a conversation that needs to happen. It's something that you should be having with your sellers. It's not just talk about comps, but talk about demand. And here's an example of a script. You could say, so your home, value based on comparable sales in the neighborhood looks like you'd fall between 500 and 525. Again, 509, like I was talking about. Your strongest competitor is at 509, and they've been on the market now for 14 days. Doesn't look like they've gone pending yet. But another way to look at pricing is based on demand. There were 12 sales that went pending in the county last month between 500 and 750, and here's the report to show you that. But the next pricing tier down from 350 to 500, there are 52 pending sales. Now it's your call, but we might want to choose to go to that other pricing strategy and come down to that next pricing point, because there's a 4x increase in activity. So you might get a lot more people interested, a lot of excitement, and you may get to a multiple offer situation. Your call, you're the decision maker, but it's something to take a look at. So there's something to think about this week. Have a great day. Good selling. We'll see you next time over at eRealEstateCoach.com.